As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
Hello and welcome to Strong Mind, Strong Body. I'm your host, Angie Miller, and today we're diving into a topic that is crucial for both your mental and your physical and your emotional well-being. It's about setting boundaries at work. So picture this. It's Friday evening. You're sitting down to dinner with your family or your significant other, and you see an email come through. It's from your boss, and he or she is asking about a project that's due next week. And you know that whoever he or she is, they expect an immediate answer. Or maybe it's a client and they're asking to reschedule tomorrow's session. I don't know if either one of these scenarios sound familiar to you, but I would imagine that it does sound familiar to at least a few of you out there. Or how about this? Maybe you're in the middle of a very focused task when a coworker pops by your desk for the third time today asking just for a quick favor, or maybe another trainer in the gym. These scenarios are very common in the workplace, whether you're a fitness trainer and you're juggling client requests, or maybe you work in the corporate world and you have a boss with no to little limits. The boundaries between work and personal life have become increasingly blurred, especially since many people are working from home post-pandemic, and even training clients and coaching clients from home. And a lot of the research is supporting that this is taking a toll on our health and our happiness. So that's why today's episode is called Bulletproof Boundaries, Safeguarding Your Sanity at Work. And yes, this is going to be a series because I'm also going to talk about safeguarding your sanity at home and how to set boundaries with people you love and care about. So, a study by the Academy of Management found that employees who answered emails after work hours experienced higher levels of anxiety. Probably not very surprising, right? And another research piece from the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology revealed that those with strong psychological boundaries between work and home experience less burnout and, of course, greater job satisfaction. So, how do we build these bulletproof boundaries? Well, let's first start with what is a working definition of boundaries, because I think this is critical. And first, I just want to say that we, you, me, each of us as individuals define our boundaries. Some people have stricter boundaries than others. We ultimately, though, we have to decide what our limits are and what that looks like or feels like when someone crosses them. And we have to be able to state our boundaries clearly, not expect other people to know what they are, because boundaries are so personal. So, in a nutshell, boundaries are like a line in the sand. They're guidelines or limits. I like that verbiage better than I like rules, because all of us are like, ooh, rules. It reminds us of being in school, right? But they're guidelines or limits that every single individual has to identify for themselves. And once you, as an individual, an autonomous individual, identify what is safe and comfortable for you, whether that's physically or emotionally or in terms of your time and energy, then it's up to you to be able to set and maintain these boundaries so that ultimately other people know what to expect. Because again, it's like saying, well, you should have known what I wanted, or you should have known what to buy me for the holidays. Yes and no. I mean, truthfully, really, it's up to us to say, this is what my comfort level is, and this is what I expect, so that people feel safe and they know how to trust us and our expectations. In my opinion, boundaries help us maintain our dignity and our self-respect. Because if we set them in a constructive, healthy way, again, we let others know what to expect. We let them know what's within our comfort zone and what's not, and how we're going to respond if they cross our boundaries. How do people know this if we never express it to them? And again, I can't emphasize it enough. If you don't know your boundaries, you're not going to be able to express them. And so no one else is going to know. And if you don't consistently reinforce your boundaries, some people are going to violate them because either knowingly or unknowingly, because it can't be like, oh, surprise, that's a boundary and you crossed it and now I'm mad at you. Doesn't really seem fair, because to me, the foundation of relationship is trust. And in order to build trust, we have to be able to communicate. This is where I'm at. This is what makes me comfortable. Again, this is what makes me not comfortable. So again, though boundaries are personal. So I think another thing that really needs to be said is that it's not our place to judge other people's boundaries. We're all autonomous individuals with different life experiences, and we all have different value systems. And really, most of us, that's how we determine our boundaries. They're based off of our values and our life experiences. So I might have boundaries that are very different from yours and vice versa, but it's not really up to me to judge what your boundaries are, or to say they're too strict or they're just too loose, because really that's up to you to decide. But the bottom line is that healthy boundaries is essential in order for us to maintain our psychological well-being. And also because in the workplace, it prevents burnout and even resentment. How often do we resent somebody for saying something or doing something? And if we were really to get clear and honest with ourselves, I wonder if we could look in the mirror and be like, but did I really communicate that? Did I really say that was a boundary? Is it fair of me to get upset if I'm not consistent or communicative in the way that I set and express my boundaries? So not only does that help us psychologically, but again, boundaries build trust. Because if I know what to expect from you and you know what to expect from me, we trust that we have a good, powerful foundation to our relationships. So the boundaries in a workplace are the difference between a healthy, positive culture and a toxic, unhealthy culture. And we know that the research does say that a lack of boundaries leads to increased levels of anxiety and depression, a lower affect and mood state, and even stress-induced physical illness. Why? Because if you cross my boundaries, I'm going to feel like you're taking advantage of me. I'm going to feel like you're violating me and that you don't respect me. And that's going to lead to a lot of stress and icky feelings. So before we talk about, though, how to set these boundaries, let's talk about some common workplace boundary violations. I'm only going to name a few because I bet I could do an entire episode on things that you could tell me that people have said to you or done to you where you're like, oh my gosh, Angie, you wouldn't believe this. And again, that could be a whole episode, but that's not really what I want to focus on. I really want to focus on how do you set and maintain the boundaries so that your boundaries being violated in the first place are going to be very minimal. Trust me, I think all of us have had boundaries crossed, and we've all probably crossed boundaries in other people's worlds and we may not even know it. So here's just a few boundary violations. You can put them in on the YouTube comments. You can share more. You can email me if you want to. But I think a few of them are excessive overtime expectations. Like maybe you work for an organization and there's just this unwritten rule that everybody's going to work endless hours because they're working from home. And so they're going to check their email at 2 a.m. or they're going to check it on weekends. Another boundary violation is just inappropriate personal questions or comments. Guys, I got to tell you, you don't even know how many times I get asked how old I am. I have no idea. Do I have a sign on me that says, ask me how old I am? Know what it is. Don't go there if you do know. But anyway, a lot of inappropriate, like personal questions and comments. I remember when I first started teaching fitness, people would always ask me what I weigh. Like, what? And then they would want to know what I ate. Don't ask. I don't know. I still haven't figured that one out. So another boundary violation would be coworkers, employees, or leaders who demand your time in unreasonable ways. Like again, you're expected to be available after hours, or gosh, you're going to Tahiti for the first time. And by the way, on your way out the door, the boss tells you, "Are you bringing your computer?" Hopefully not. Another boundary violation would be unreasonable workload or deadline pressures, like I need this yesterday kind of thing. That's highly stress inducing. Another one would be being asked to attend endless meetings, half of which probably don't even apply to you, but maybe your organization just loves meetings. All too often, though, again, our boundaries are crossed simply because we don't express them and we don't maintain them consistently. And here's the big one, drum roll, please, because we struggle to say the word no. Okay. So I'm going to tell you some barriers to healthy boundary setting, some reasons that I think we don't set healthy boundaries. And when I get into healthy boundaries at home, it's going to feel a lot more personal. But here's some reasons why I think we don't set boundaries in the workplace, or maybe we don't set them consistently, or, we struggle to maintain them. I think one is we're afraid of upsetting people. Maybe you're a people pleaser. I may or may not be. I think I've told you many times I am. So you want people's approval, and you're afraid that if you say no, then they might think less of you, or they might think you're not a team player, or they might think you're not a hard worker. Yep, I've had all those thoughts. Another obstacle to healthy boundaries is we fear rejection or even abandonment, especially in relationships. Like, they won't include us or they won't like us if we set and maintain healthy boundaries. So maybe at work, you want to be liked by everybody. You want to get invited to Friday night happy hour. So gosh forbid you be the one to say no, because what if they exclude you? Because you know what, even as adults, I know we're not in middle school anymore, but even as adults, let's face it, we like to be included. I love to be asked. Even if I say no, I love the idea that someone thought about me. And I think most of us do. So another barrier to setting healthy boundaries is we fear confrontation, right? We're like, well, what if they challenge me? And for some of us, like confrontation, there's a real fear behind that. Like, I do not want to have confrontation with people. Another barrier would be guilt and fear. Those are big ones. What if, fear is like, what if I lose my job if I say no? What if my boss thinks that other people are working harder than me? And then the guilt is the shoulds. I teach about shoulds and don't tell anybody, but I struggle with the shoulds. Okay. Because I'm better at helping you than me, apparently. So I should say yes if I want to raise, or I should work on that project this weekend so that I can impress everyone. We create these should stories, say that 10 times, in our head, and these expectations, but really they're stories. They're not truths. We create these stories based on our own experiences, but this doesn't mean they're truths. Another barrier is that if we're not clear about our boundaries, what we will and won't accept about what's healthy and unhealthy for us, then that's a barrier because we haven't actually communicated it. And then another big one, and I really want to hone in on this one, is we don't have the conversation up front. We wait until it gets uncomfortable. And then we're like, oh, I wish I would have said something. Okay. It's kind of like I use a group fitness example. I now say at the beginning of my group fitness classes, hey, feel free to answer your phone outside of the room. So if your phone rings, feel free to take it outside of the room. Feel free to text outside of the room. Feel free to talk after class, because that way I'm kind of setting the precedent. That way I'm not like interrupting people if they're chatty during class or they're answering their phone. It's that same concept in a work environment, right? Just have the conversation up front. Right when you take the job, or preferably when you're interviewing, yeah, find out what the expectations are and decide for yourself if that's in your comfort zone. Because if they tell you in the interview that you're going to be working weekends, and then later you get spicy that you're working weekends, that's not really fair, because in fairness to them, they told you that was part of the deal, right? And then you said yes to the job. So if they tell you you need to be available for after hours work, then you get to say yes or no, depending on whether that's comfortable for you. So it's not like you're going to be shocked later. But I think during the interview, if they don't bring it up, if they don't say what the expectations are, I think it's a good time to ask, do you expect weekend work? Do you expect me to respond to emails, texts, phone calls after work? And then you can say, well, this is kind of what my parameters are. And just say it up front. Because if you take the job and you're like, oh, I'll tell them later, that's when you're going to get into these super unhealthy conversations. And that's where it's going to feel like confrontation. And then they're going to have a trust issue because they're going to be like, well, we told you and you accepted the job. And now you're telling us, oh, gee, this doesn't work for me. So I think having the conversation up front, before you teach the class, before you train the client, before you take the job, it's going to mitigate, it's like setting a contract, which is really what employers do. They give you a contract, right? And then I think in a way you have to give them a contract and say, this is what you're comfortable with. Not maybe a physical contract, but just letting them know. Another, final barrier to setting boundaries is when it comes to working with clients, not having a contract, right? You can have the conversation up front, but I also think you need a contract. I taught university students for 5 years, and I always joke that my syllabus got longer and longer every semester because I would realize that students figured out loopholes and they found workarounds. And I'd be like, oh, I never thought about that. That would go in my syllabus the next semester. And then sure enough, another student would try something and that would go in my syllabus because again, it wasn't necessarily that my students were trying to be tricky or, do something, behind my back. It was just that I didn't say it and I never thought about it. And so until I do, they're not going to know. So have a contract for your clients if you're a trainer or a coach. Make sure you set all of your parameters in your contract. And the more you work with clients, your contract's probably going to get longer and very clearly defined. And that's good. It's good because you're not going to have uncomfortable conversations with them, and nobody likes that. So again, I'm Angie Miller. I am talking about healthy boundaries at work so that you can maintain your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, and your physical well-being. So I listed some, obstacles that get in the way to us setting healthy boundaries. And I talked about what healthy boundaries are. And now I'm going to get into the real core, which is strategies. How do you set and maintain healthy boundaries in a consistent manner? And I can't say the word consistent enough because consistency builds trust. So, number one, I think one strategy to clearly set and maintain healthy boundaries is define how you want to communicate and when. So, I'm going to give you an example. I had a client named Sarah. She was a really, really dedicated health coach. She loved what she did, but she found herself answering client texts at all hours. Like they would text her at 2 a.m. or on evenings out or on weekends. So one of the things that when I worked with Sarah, one of the things that we came up with was she started setting up an autoresponder for her texts and her emails. And her autoresponder would state her working hours and when people could expect a response. So it was something to the effect of, thank you for reaching out. My hours are Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. I will be happy to get back with you during my working hours within 24 hours, whatever it is for you. But I do think that this is a really good idea for all of us. And ideally, this would be in your contract before you even start working with the clients so that they know right away what to expect upfront. It's in your contract. So another way to set and maintain healthy boundaries is to clearly define your job responsibilities. So go back to that interview. If your employer isn't clear, again, ask a lot of questions in the interview so you know before you accept the job what's going to be expected of you. Stated up front what your comfort zone is before the situation arises. Again, then you don't have to be confrontational. You don't have to worry that you're the bad employee who won't answer her phone at 2 in the morning. But also, then you know what your leaders expect and they know what you can deliver. It's going to mitigate those uncomfortable conversations. And ideally, it's going to keep you from getting burnout. Now, mind you, some of you might be saying, well, when I took the job, no one ever said these things, and I didn't ask, and I'm in this really uncomfortable situation. Well, then I think it's up to us as autonomous individuals to kind of start taking some notes about what's really at the core of causing our burnout and resentment. And then break it down into like a few things. Like, I only want to answer texts at this time. I don't want to work on weekends. And then approach your leader and say, here's some things that I have some concerns about. Can we discuss these? But before I would even do that, I would start with, here's what I love about my job. Here's the things that are working. Do you have any concerns for me? And then I would go into concerns. I always start out with the positive, right? Start out with positive, what's working, what you love, and then you can ease your way into some of the stuff that's a harder conversation. So another way, I talked about clearly define your communication preferences, define your job responsibilities. Another big thing about setting and maintaining boundaries is learning to say no. It's a really small word. It's a small word, but it has a big impact. Learning to say no effectively is really, really critical. So, you can try something like, I appreciate you thinking of me for this project. However, unfortunately, my plate is super full with commitments, and I don't think I could give this the attention that it deserves. And I like to deliver top quality work. Is there a way we can revisit this in 30 days, 20 days, 10 days, whatever your timeline is? And then, or is there a way we could delegate some of my current tasks so that I can take this project on? So it's polite, it's professional, it's offering alternative solutions, it's giving them a definitive time frame. And remember that if you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. Here's some other ways that I think are really effective about saying no. In fact, this is one of my favorite conversations, how to say no effectively. One is be a broken record. Sometimes when we say no, people are persistent. They pretend not to hear us, or maybe they don't hear us, honestly. So my suggestion, be a broken record, which means keep your responses brief, keep them consistent. No, I'm not able to move your session. And keep repeating it no matter their objections. One sentence repeated over and over again, eventually they're going to realize you are not budging. Their tactics might change, but your response won't. And eventually they get the point. Instead of over explaining, just simple statement, stay with it. Don't keep over explaining. And then the second part of learning to say no is try not to apologize, not be a sorry girl, a sorry guy. A firm, confident no saves a lot of time and energy. So instead of, I'm sorry, I can't help you, but my mom is sick, or, my kids are driving me crazy this summer. How about just a simple, no, I'm not able to move your session. And that's good enough. Because anything more, the more you over talk and over explain, the more people hear guilt. And I have a big guilt radar. When I over explain and I apologize, I just look guilty. We all do. And so if you're over explaining and over apologizing, people are going to think you're guilty. They're going to see a little loophole and they're going to come at you a lot harder. So keep in mind, again, apologies make us sound guilty. It's okay to guard your time and guard your family and guard whatever you value that is most important to you. The other thing that you can do when you're saying no is you can take your time, right? Meaning sometimes you're not sure. Do I want to say no? Do I want to say yes? This sounds like a good thing, but I'm struggling with my time management right now. So maybe you say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure right now. could you give me like 24 hours or 48 hours to decide if I can fit this in? I want to be very strategic and thoughtful about if I can do this because I really want to deliver good work. Most people are going to have utmost respect for that because they do want you to deliver good work, and they're going to have respect for the fact that you really are conscientious in your decision making. And then last but not least, when it comes to saying no, maybe you want to leave the door open. Maybe you don't really want to be like, no, hard no, never. Maybe you're more like, hey, kind of a soft no right now, but it might work later. So maybe say, hey, I can't do that right now at this time, but I can maybe consider doing this in 30 days from now or 6 months from now. Can we revisit this? And then give them, again, a specific date. This keeps you in good professional standing. It shows that you have initiative, you're thoughtful, and you're plan focused. All right. So that's how to say no. There's many ways to say it, but I think short and simple is best. So another way to set and maintain boundaries is to define your space boundaries. And I had to go there because, you might work from home or you might work in an open office plan, or maybe your office at work or at home doesn't have doors, or maybe you train in a gym so you're visible and people approach you all the time, even in the middle of a session. So how do you establish proper boundaries? Well, I can tell you firsthand, my office door in my home does not have a door. So I bought one of those folding screens because I was like, yes, people can see over it. But it's my way when my screen is closed of saying, theoretically, my door is closed. Please don't come in. But, a few ways to establish space boundaries is you can use visual cues. So if you're in an open plan, you can just put up like a do not disturb sign. You can put it up on your monitor or whatever it might be so that people, if you're in a collaborative space, they can see that. If you're training clients and people are always coming up to you because they have a question or they want something from you, you can just have a simple phrase like, I'll be finished with this session at noon and I can come find you then. If you work from home, set these clear parameters with other people in your household so that they know when is your quiet time, when you're free to discuss concerns, when you can't be disturbed, and, maybe put a do not disturb sign on your home office door if you can. And, last but not least, there's always noise canceling headphones. So sometimes if you are in an open concept plan or you're at a gym and you're not working with a client, but you are trying to get planning or note taking done, you can always wear these noise canceling headphones. It's just a polite way of saying, I'm occupied right now, right? You're not like turning people away. You're just letting them know you're occupied. Same thing that we do when we fly, right? We put on these headphones like, please don't talk to me. So another one when you're setting boundaries is define your digital boundaries. So we're in this hyper connected world and it's easy to feel like we're always on call. So if you really, people check their phones constantly. We all do it. But if you really want to set digital boundaries, set limits on, hey, I'm only going to communicate during these hours. So even if you text me. So again, the automation helps on that. Maybe use technology to enforce boundaries. So like app blockers, or again, the autoresponders. Manage your social media connections with people that you work with carefully. Because remember, if you work with somebody, you go out Friday night and you post your, pictures of you being wild and crazy. You have to ask yourself, is that something you want people at work to see or your clients to see? You can even use an app that blocks your email after 7 p.m. Or like on my computer, I have a do not disturb so that during the hours of like 8 to 8, I think it is, it doesn't ping me if a text or an email comes in. And that just helps me mitigate the stress of constantly seeing stuff coming in. So last but not least, address boundary violators directly. Whether it's a boss or a coworker or a client, there's always going to be boundary pushers. Even if you're like, Angie, I promised you I have set the best boundaries. Everyone knows where I stand. Some people are going to push boundaries. So I say, start with a healthy conversation. I always like to start with questions because questions invite information and they don't put people on the defensive. So you definitely want to avoid them getting is going well for us in our training, or what do you think is going well for me in my work relationship, if you're talking to your boss? Are there any areas that you would like to see me improve, or do you have any concerns? And then you can lead into, here's what I think is working well, and here's where I have some concerns, and then use I statements and be sure to explain where you're coming from using I statements. All right. So, last but not least, just make sure if you're a business owner, you're establishing your business practices up front. You're putting it in a contract, how you collect payment, what your refund policy is, what your cancel policy is, and when you can be reached, among other things. Remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It's essential for your well being. And as Brene Brown says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. Okay. So I'm Angie Miller. I am so glad you joined me for this episode. I will see you next week on how to set boundaries with people you care about in your personal relationships.